All right, welcome everyone. My name is Jennifer Broadwater, and we're going to be doing the Purchasing and Expenses Webinar 101. I will be going over the items that you see on the screen today. And this webinar should be about an hour. And I am from Workamajig. I'm one of the probably 13 trainers. And this is geared towards newer people being exposed to the purchasing and expenses part, but we will go into some of the details and some of the newer items as we go through this. So welcome everyone. And if you do have follow-up questions after today's webinar, you can write to support@workamajig.com. That will get you to I'm sorry, I was just checking to see how many. I have 25 attendees. It will get you to some of the, if you have more detailed questions, I may refer you at the end to talk to your own Workamajig trainer, and they will respond with any more answers that I'm not able to cover in the 1 hour time period today. So welcome everyone. All right, so we're going to first go over some back end stuff, and only because I know this should be set up for most of you guys already, but sometimes it's easy or to understand, using purchase orders. Why do we use them? When do we use them? If you can kind of see where they come from, and that some of the stuff you have in your system, you don't always know why, when I go to make an expense report, why am I only getting these 4 items? It's something that was set up in the back end, and it can be changed at any time. So, just because you've set it up in the past doesn't mean it doesn't need to be altered to make it more customizable for you guys. Anyways, all right, so I'm going to go into me now. And all right. All right, so I want to start off with some back end for purchasing expenses. So the first thing you guys would need to know, not everybody would have this, but if you do have your access to Admin Manager, you would have access to your employees. And through there, that's kind of the very first step of setting this up for using purchasing and expenses. And it's basically for purchase orders. So if you click on anybody's name, it doesn't really matter. Want to make sure that the back end is set up correctly. And it probably already is for most of you. But if you go to the accounting section, and you'll see that sometimes you may need to make sure you have expense report approvers on there, like when you do have expense reports or credit card approvers. They could be the same person, there could be somebody else. That just who at that point is just who is there. But what I really wanted to get to is PO limits. So everyone in your office, if it's, could have a PO limit. That means they can order something up to a certain amount. And you would just put, what are they eligible to do? At least one person in the office has to have the highest, like $10 million, whatever there is. And then, according to how we set this up, you may only have like 3 people to approve purchase orders. And then everybody else won't even be, you need to do anything, but they could be different amounts for different people. And the reason you would do that is if, say, you may have a regular project manager and you say, oh yeah, I'm going to give him a limit of $1,000. But if it's over that, I need to go to Keanu Reeves because he has $1 million limit. So it kind of just sets up that process of, how much you should be able to order. So you're going to put that there. Oh, interesting. I hope you guys were able to see my screen prior to right now, because something just came up and said participants can see your screen, which hopefully was already happening. In any case, that's the only back end here to make sure that, again, PO limit. If you similarly, you can also have insertion and broadcast order limits listed here under the accounting for each item. The other back end item I want to go to is a transaction preference. Well, actually a couple. It's in your admin manager again, in your system setup. There's transaction preferences to how you guys want these set up for purchase orders, because I am going to be talking about the purchase order part today. How do you want them default? There's some setup in the back end where you can decide how you want your headers and footers and next number and prefixes. So just note that this comes from here. Who do you want on the purchase orders and how do you want them printed? So purchase orders has its own transaction preferences. And really, it's just, automatically, here's like an important one where I said multiple people can have ability to approve purchase orders. Why does it need to go to the head person, the CEO of the office, when it's only $1,000? Well, this is how that would assign the person with the lowest limit automatically. Then it's not going to need to bother the CEO when you have a $500 little thing that you need to buy for your project. So just note, this is a good way to do that. Now, these headers and footers and defaults, those are also in the back end. So if you haven't already set those up, I believe it's in this area. And you can go through and set up headers and footers and define your order types. I'm not going to, this takes a while for each person to, set these up, but just know if you click into them, you can decide what your headers should say, where they should be located, or your footers. And that can be designed when we go through the process to make it easier. Let's see. So that was in the back end under purchasing, just some customization. And while the final thing why we're back here today is you have purchase items and expense report items. These should already be set up for you. But these are the things I'm talking about that you could probably change. If you ever find, you're trying to use some item to purchase and it's not on your list, this is where they get defined. So I have my own items that I would typically use, such as like Getty's images. And so I want to be able to purchase that for my projects. I need to have a purchase item for it. So anything you can think of that you may purchase for your projects is something that needs to be listed on here for the project, project management side. Specifically, accounting side has a whole nother list of kind of things, but that's in your purchasing and purchase items. And then your expense report items in here. Another back end, we already have some in there. You may have some in there, but don't be afraid to now, change these at any point, as long as you, check with the accountant and put the appropriate expense and sales accounts on here. But you can always adjust these as needed also. So I'm going to show you how those all work together. So that's really the back end part of getting set up to do these. Now I'm going to take you through it using purchase orders through a project. That's number 2. We're already on to. Fantastic. Okay, so purchase orders, why do you use them on projects? Because you want to they're basically a holding place until the actual vendor invoice or credit card charges or whatever it is that you're ordering comes through. So you want to account for that expense. You do not have to use a purchase order. You could just basically have a vendor invoice or credit card hit the project, and that's fine. But a lot of times you want to account for that and show it in an estimate, so you can tell your client, hey, these are what we expect to purchase for this, and this is how much we're going to charge you for it. So that's why we typically use purchase orders. So we're going to go through a project to do that first. So I have a project set up. So this is the use case scenario, how I would typically do it. I would create a project. I would have a schedule like you guys all have. So we have a schedule, we have some hours, and then we get to the part where we want to either I can come down here and create a purchase order, but most of the time I would want the proper way, or I say the Workamajig way, is to do it through an estimate. So estimates, I'm not here to show you how to do estimates. Hopefully you've been familiar with those. I'm going to add one just to go through the purchase order process. So I'm going to save a purchase this, and I'm going to pull in some labor, and then we'll get to the expenses. Okay, and now, so the purchase order part comes in when you add expenses. So the first thing you note is you're going to, and if you didn't see where I was at, it will tell me here, gross expenses, and I'm going to click on the zeros here. And you're just going to start adding what expenses are expected for this project. I would say in most of my clients, they're not using a lot of expenses. They're usually using it for contracted employees, sometimes some purchase items, some print items. They're not using this like a bunch, but you could use as many as you want. So you can first, you have to pick an item. So that was that list I showed you a few minutes ago. And you would be like, what do I need to add for this? I'm going to use this one because I already talked about it. I need to, oh, actually, I'm not going to use that one. Getty's images is usually overhead. I'm going to save that to talk about in a few minutes. I usually like to do shipping. All right, so we're going to say there's some shipping costs because they ordered something that's on paper and we need to ship it to them, right? It can be tied to a task. You don't have to do that. I'll just say copy revisions. It doesn't matter. If you know a vendor, great. And that would be where we're coming to the, hey, I need to get a purchase order for the vendor. So I'm going to say I'm going to purchase this from Costco. For some reason, they'll do my shipping. You can create long descriptions that can follow through. You can create some comments internally. And this is where I decide, like, how many of these do I need? How much and how much is the cost that I'm going to order? So we're not going to go into the create a quote today, but you could actually send this out to several vendors and get a quote from them. We're just going to go through the purchase order process. So I'm going to say I need 3 of these shipped and they're going to cost $100 a piece, right? Okay, so I can mark these up to my client. If I want to take a little bit extra, I could, or I can leave it the same. So this is one expense on here. I could add multiple expenses if I want to, but I'm going to keep this simple today and just have one expense on here. Once you approve this, as you know, somebody has to approve this, whether it be you or somebody else, but once this is approved, you can then create a purchase order right from the expenses here, which is the easiest and best way, in my opinion, that you can do this. So once we approve this, you have an approved, if nothing else goes in your head today, the approved estimate is your budget for the project. Hopefully you've learned that by now. And I can easily go back to here now that I've approved it. I can open up this line, oops, and I can create the purchase order. And the reason I like to do it like this is because everything fills in for you. It's like already there. There's no reason to go anywhere else, even though we give you 100 other alternatives to doing it here. But once you create this purchase order, it automatically assigns the number. And this is where I told you guys, you're either going to have the rights to approve it or somebody else is going to have the rights. And if you click over on the right side, I just happen to be the person that has the rights because I have all the rights. But you may see other people listed on here. So if I wanted it to be that anyone approved for this limit, it would go out to everyone. So if this was not, if I couldn't approve my own stuff, I may only have, 3 people on here. And instead of directing it to a specific person, I could just send it to anyone. They would receive a notification in their bell, and whoever approves it first, it's like any, meeny, miny, mo, then it would disappear for everyone else. So if you're, if a couple people are out of the office and you just do it like this, that would ensure that somebody would get it, right? So that's how that works over here, and it's usually a hyperlink. Now, the approve process, again, is either going to say submit or approve. And in this details, this area is where you're going to be setting up what we talked about a few minutes ago. What do you want your footers and headers and stuff to look like? There's additional information you can add into here. You can, select an address in here. You could have different contacts you may need to get to. I only have one on this one. But again, a lot of information is inside this pen that you can change. You could actually notify other people, send attachments, or even a spec sheet. Like if you have a spec sheet that needs to be added to this, when you send it for it, so they know the details of what you're asking for, you could add a spec sheet from your system in here. I'm going to go ahead and approve this. You could make comments if you want. And then your PO is, again, the holding place for the items that you're getting. And so this now can be printed and sent, from here. You could, and we're not going to talk about pre-billing from now, but as soon as you create a purchase order, if you needed to pre-bill, you could do that from here. You can download these. This is the purchase order going to Sylvia Plath. You can download these, print them, however you want to do this, or email it to the client. I mean, not the client, to the vendor, right? So I can do that from here. I can also go to the more key, and I could pre-bill this order. I'm not going to do that today, but I would like to let you know that's how you could do it. And if you accidentally made one and you need to close it out, you can manually close these out. But basically at this point, this is now part of your budget that we're waiting for that vendor invoice to come in for the shipping for Costco, right? So when we step out of here, there's two things to remember. We now have $300 of gross expenses from this purchase order for this total. So a couple other places we can see this information. If I was to go to the budget, and if you have this set up appropriately, or you can see in the budget this expense waiting to come in. So if you haven't looked at the budget in here, why is this taking so long? Not sure. But if you haven't already looked into the budget, you can set these up a million different ways to see things the way you want to see them if they actually open. Why is this taking so long? Sorry, guys. Wait for it. I know if I touch something over here, there. So here is my open orders gross on billed. So this will show up if I'm doing this by item. So I know this is on billed, hasn't been billed yet because I didn't pre-bill it or it wouldn't be here. So that's where I would see this. So some of the things you may not know, I mean, I'm not going to go over how to do the budgets, but just to note, these system settings is where you're going to decide what items you need in here, or what would be helpful to you. If I click on this, it's going to tell me, here's my purchase order. So everything's kind of circular. It just goes back to the purchase order. I will also be able, there it is. I will also be able to see this purchase order as it's open down here in the purchase orders. Obviously, here's my open orders. So again, clicking on that just takes me back to it. So it's going to stay open until I get a vendor invoice, which closes it out. So right now, it's just an order. Doesn't really affect any financials or anything. And again, it can be billed to the client or not billed to the client. So that's how you set up that. And you also see it as a transaction, I think. Also here in the transactions, I should be able to see that $300 as an order, and it will be listed that. When I close this out in a few minutes, this order will turn into something that says voucher. Because then we know it's a real live expense. Right now, we're just waiting for it. So let me see here. All right, so we've got through these purchase orders. Again, there is one other place you could do purchase orders. I prefer you do them. Well, I prefer all of my clients to do them from the project themselves, but occasionally I want to let you guys know you can do a purchase order right from the purchasing today page. And I can just come in here and create a blank one. Again, I just think it ties better to the project if you do it from there because the information's already there. But if I wanted to create one from here, great. So that purchase order is already in there. So from this point, what happens is someday you actually have to pay for the bill for the shipping, right? That's what happens. Usually the accounting side gets that information. So the accounting person gets the vendor invoice and matches it up to the purchase order, and that dissolves that purchase order. So same place, we're going purchasing, today purchasing, and that person that gets that would just be like, oh, I got my vendor invoice. Well, they probably wouldn't be that happy about it though. And they would pick the vendor. Oh, look, it's Costco. And they would look under here and see if there's an outstanding order. Here's the one we were looking for. So we're going to plug that in automatically. This part you may not do. I mean, usually there's a division of, responsibilities, but I want to show you how they connect. So there's no other way to do that other than to put that in. So we'll pretend that that's, they had an invoice number in here. Actually, I probably already have it in there. Is it overhead? No, we're going to actually, in this case, it's not going to be. You may need to change some of these other items, but when you hit save, the item will come up for the purchase order of the amount that you put in for. Now, here's the, when I looked at this page the first time, I'm not going to lie, this seemed a little confusing. I'm like, what are all these numbers? What am I supposed to do with this? Really, we're only concentrating on what is this open net right here and what did it match the vendor invoice that came in. I can click on here and I can make it higher or lower. If I make it lower, it means, hey, I'm not sure. And I won't automatically close out this purchase orders because the system says, well, am I waiting for another bill? Did they only bill me half of it? And I'm waiting for another half. So if I was to change this to 150, it will not close out this order unless I press close here. It will leave it open for an additional purchase order, which some people do. If I make this higher and then the bill came in for 400, that's the amount I have to pay, then it will close it out. And if it's the same, it will close it out. So we're just going to be very simple and change this here. for my 3. What you do then is you then save that, and that replaces that purchase order with the vendor invoice. So applying the orders, and then that becomes the vendor invoice. So again, you might not have to deal with this side. If there was other additional items, you could click here and it's going to open up the other purchase order you saw there a second ago, and I could add that to this if I needed to, for the $50. I don't need to do that, but just that's what that's for. If there's other ones, you could be having one vendor invoice and you could have multiple projects, right? With multiple things you ordered from Costco, and you need to put them on different projects, right? So you could do that through that line here. What else do I need to let you know? At this point, you could still come in here and change things. I mean, hopefully you don't need to. Pay no attention to my credit over there. And in the details, let me make sure these are just the things that you probably won't need to change on here. These should already be set up for terms and stuff like that when it's due. But once this is approved, or you submit this and approved it, this vendor invoice is now going to be on that project. So if I post this, which you normally wouldn't be posting right now, but I just want to let you guys know the posting details, if you have the ability to post, where they go to based on, oh, well, we're not going to post it now because I messed something up on my GL. In any case, it doesn't matter. It's going to hit your books as soon as someone posts it. So we're going to go back to that project now and take a look at it again from this state, which was this one. All right. So what's happened now is if I go down to my purchase orders, it's now a closed order, right? What else happens on here? In the budget, it should be removed from the pending area. And depending on how you set up your project, if your project was going to be bill the actuals, the time and expenses, then this item would be ready to be billed. This page is just super slow for me every time I come to it. Just a minute, guys. All right. So you'll open orders gross on billed, and now it changes. So because it's now a transaction. So when I said you go down to the transactions next, no, you don't have to do this. I'm just trying to show you the entire thing. I said that no longer says PO. Now it says voucher here. So this item now could be charged to your client. If you go back into the project settings, if you on the billing options said time and materials, then it's immediately available for you to bill your client if you didn't already pre-bill it through the purchase order. If it was a fixed fee, it would have been there anyways, because when it would be the amount that you had put there, even if it was 400, it would still say fixed fee at 300, unless you changed it on the estimate. So again, this one is time and materials. All that means someday, later on when we talk about this, it would go down to the billing area and it'd be ready for it to bill. Makes sense? I see, here's my voucher, and here's my $300. I can immediately bill my client for that if I'd like to. All right, so that's kind of, let me see, the vendor invoice side. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the credit card side. So you have a couple of choices on credit cards. You're going to be, it's essentially almost the same thing. Sometimes you have to make purchases and the boss gave you a credit card, lucky you, and those items can come in one of two ways. So from the purchasing area, these are also expenses for your project. Either somebody is entering, you charge something and that charge gets entered and it automatically loads into our system through what's called Plaid, which would be another call, but if you have that set up, your items would be in here, or you're coming in and you are actually entering a credit card charge individually for the project because you purchased something on the credit card and it needs to show onto the project. So you have kind of two different choices. I can't say one method is preferred over the other, but if you have a lot of credit card charges, you're probably going to want to use Plaid because it's going to automatically be coming in a few days after the charge is done, and it will be easier. So I'm going to show you real quick both ways. So if you could do, where did I charged it on my credit card. and I went to Bob's, I don't know, where could I go to? What is I purchasing at Walgreens something? And who did it, who purchased it? I can put my own name here, which this purchase by is whoever has access to that card should show up in this drop down. And then it could be on a project, and I'll put it on the project we were just on. And what was the item that you purchased? We purchased some more shipping because I didn't know what else to purchase, and how much did that cost. So, you know, you can individually, whatever that credit card charge is, I can do this individually and hit save, right? And I didn't put it as overhead, so I can, that becomes a charge onto the project itself. You could also, just so you know, if you have the credit card charges already in here, this allows you to open these charges up here and pretty much do the same thing and put those through to what is the item that we did, you know, what project did that go to? Is it billable? Yes, I have a hand raised, Leslie, and I don't even know how to answer that. Chat. I'm thinking that, Leslie, I know your hand is raised, and I know I can't put you on the thing. If you can write into the chat area, then I can answer your question. I think it's a chat. And then I'll check it as soon as you do. There should be a button at the top. Oh, anyways, you can actually add these into, you know, obviously all the information, and then save it. And then you can pick that item after you do it and process selected. Now, this is the whole other side you probably won't be on, but I wanted to let you know this is where it goes through. Yay, I have a chat. How does the purchasing know? They don't. So that you will notice. That's a good question. So when I opened up this for the first time, the person needs to know what project that goes on. So the person entering this information has to know what project. It does not default. If it doesn't default to a project and you leave it blank, it's just like your, you know, your overhead, your cost of goods sold, and it's not going to show on a project. So it's very important, either when you have the credit card connector, when someone enters this information, that they need to assign it to the project through here and what item that is, so it gets tagged to it. So I think I just did that on this one. Did I actually close that? Let me just show you how that billable. Did I put it to that project? Yes. And did I put it in there and process selected? So it will process it to that project, and we'll go back to that and look at that. All right, so we don't care for today about the fact that this is then now somebody's got to pay this bill. We're really concentrating on the project side of it. So we're going back to this project. Again, now if I look at the transactions, first thing, you know, is it billable? Now I'm going to see that credit card transaction. I actually did two purchases on here. This would not be billed to the client unless, again, it's time and materials, and I can bill that to the client. Otherwise, it's just going to be tracked as an expense, so that declines your profit when you have, you know, the expenses on here. So where else am I going to see that? If I go to billing, I'd be able to see it there. It will not show up in the estimates or anywhere else. It's just that's where it ends. Basically, I'm putting it towards the project. If I, for some reason, did want to add a credit card charge, you wouldn't add it into an estimate, a credit card charge. So you wouldn't really ever see it here. What else did I want to show you on here? Credit cards. All right, so that really, expense reports. So another part of the purchasing, and if you have more questions on the credit card, because the credit card's a little more complex because people are doing them and there's a lot of different setup in the back end, a little more complex. So if you have further questions on that, I want you to note that you can just go to support@workamajig.com and get the details of that. Now, the expense reports, we hope that most of our clients do use expense reports, and that's when you are told, hey, go buy an airline ticket to so-and-so, come to Arizona, where we are, visit us and go to our boot camp, and then we'll reimburse you later. So that's really another thing that can be project related or not project related. but sometimes you may have expenses that you want to charge and they are in the everyone expense report. So when you first go to here, this may be blank, may have a bunch in here that haven't been processed. It's kind of like kind of up to you. These expense report items, I'm going to go through how to do one if you haven't already used them. You're just going to click the plus sign. You're going to add a new expense receipt. You're going to hopefully again know what projects, which we did this one. Again, you can put it to a task, you can put it to an item, and the item list is based on what has been set up in your back end and can be changed. So we'll just say that I needed some airfare today and my airfare was $800. And I can expand this line and add other things. So just, it always confused me before because I was like, how do I do this? How do I get into this? Kind of just have to open up on the side until you see this little toggle here. Is it billable? Do I need to attach stuff? Oops, how about I put 1 in here? It makes more sense. Sorry about that. And then do I mark it up? So I could even mark this up to my client. Does not have to have a task, but does have to have an item. This then has either a submit or an approve. Once you do this, again, as soon as I approve this, this is going to go over to the project area. And from the project area, then you'll also see that where I can bill it or not bill it. And then the other side of this is obviously this can get paid back to you. And that's usually either done through payroll or it's done as a separate check. So either way, I can have multiple items on here. I can have attachments on here, but I either need to submit or approve this and it will go through there. If you aren't quite a person that uses expense reports, this expense report, once it's been submitted and it is not yet approved, it does go through a process where it would go to someone's bill, whoever the approver is, and then they would approve it for you. And then it would go through the reimbursement process, which is basically, it would end up in the purchasing today page. Whoops, purchasing today page. But again, we're going to go back to the project. Same project. We're going to look at it from that side. So again, now if I go down to transactions or billing, it doesn't matter on this one. I would be able to see that item for the expense report. It will be listed on here for that $800 and I can charge my client and it can be tracked as an expense, right? All right, I have another question. Yes, Amy, Doucheman, I'm not sure how to say it. Yes, you can add several lines on one expense report, job related and one non-job related. I believe it's line by line, but let's go make sure because sometimes I forget if it's line by line. It's a good question. Because if I say this one's billable, that's great. And then if I add in that, oops, I didn't actually add anything. Let's put this as here for, which is just checking to make sure that you can do one line. What does it not like? Oh, see how picky our system is? Make sure that you have it all in there. You get red notes. Yes. And then the next one I could do another different item for hotel and make it, and leave it not. So you can have some of it billable, some of it not, some to project, some not to a project. So you could do that all on one and now you're owed $105 for this basically. So that is a good question. Yes, I'll just make sure I put yes on that. Okay. Well, let me go back to this project. Dun, dun, dun. It's coming. All right. All right, here we go. Sorry, I was checking messages. Let's see. So again, in your daily feed, it will show this information as we do it. The last thing I want to talk about, again, that you could have put in an estimate, just so you know, that is some of the things in the expenses. I have to unapprove this to show it to you. If I needed to add that as an expense, can I get back into there? The same thing, I could go through here and find those. You'll see not just purchase items, but your expense report items could be on here. So if I wanted to charge them or show them on the estimate that I have, these items, then I can do it through here. Just, you know, if you were, especially if you were charging fixed fee is when you would want to do this. So I'm just going to reapprove that. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about for today is what happens when you have items that your company has already paid for, but you kind of want to pass some of that cost off or show it for on the project profitability. But say it's something like postage, or you've actually used paper or something that you have in your office that is basically an overhead item. Those items if you, I have one more question, Leslie Stout. If you have a fixed fee, you can't change the approved estimate. That's the fixed fee and it's fixed. Well, technically you could change it later by unapproving it and adding it to it either as, I should have talked about that because it's not just as, hey, I should just go and change that. You would have to like add it later and then advise the client that this expense came up, and you technically you should probably make it a change order, which I didn't talk about. You can make a change order, add that new item, approve it, and then you'll have 2 approved estimates. You could unapprove an estimate if you forgot something, you know, if you have the security right to unapprove it, add it back on. But of course you would want to tell your client that, you know, this is fixed fee, this is what we're billing. Otherwise, yes, don't check that it's add it back on later. I mean, that wouldn't be good practice, just randomly. I didn't mean to say you should randomly add other expenses on later. I mean, typically this would be done at the beginning when you were estimating everything. But yes, you could either make it a change order, unapprove it if you needed to on here. Okay, so yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to steer you wrong. You should definitely do the estimate correct the first time. I just had to do that for demo purposes. Anyways, miscellaneous cost. This is where you're going to add any item that has already been paid for by your company, but you kind of want to allocate a portion of that. So I like to think, you know, what did you buy in mass? Something like Getty's images or something, Facebook ads, or something that you added and you've already bought. It was considered overhead, and I want to pass that cost off to my client. There is no approval process for it. You can add as many as you want. Oh, I'm going to stop for 1 second. Why this matters is if you don't bill the client for the new expense, you end up with a 0 change order that accounting can't find. Not quite understanding that question. Let's see. Yes, if you didn't, then you wouldn't want to track it to the project. I think that's what you're saying, Leslie, is so how do you add unmild expenses to a fixed fee project build? I wish we had a little bit of just let you talk instead of using this method. So you wouldn't track it to, if you didn't want to track it to the project, you can track it to the project and you would mark it not billable. You can still, it would still go to the project, but so on the expense report, you can say, I want it to be tracked to the project, but I don't want to, it's kind of what I was just going to show you with the miscellaneous costs. I want to track it to the project so I can see it as an expense, and then it's correct for accounting. But I don't want to bill my client. That would be more what you would do for that, is like, just check the box that I want to show it on the project, account for it as an expense, but not bill my client for it. Otherwise, if I do want to bill my client, it either needs to be billable or put in as part of the estimate, which can be the new one. So on that note, Leslie, thank you very much. I will have you also, if that didn't make any sense, go to support@workamajig.com and I can follow up with you on that later. All right, so back to the miscellaneous cost. When you're adding these, just again, think of something that you already have in your office. It can be tied to the task. I'm just going to say, you know, I had to buy some Getty's images on here, and I just want to show that they were $10. Again, I can open this up and I can decide, is it billable or not billable to the client here. So if it's just something I need to show, great. If I mean, most of the time you're putting these on here, I need to track it and I want to show my client. It's up to you on here. I can even mark it up if I wanted to, and I can have as many of these as I need to. So, and some can be billable, some cannot be billable. It doesn't really matter. But as soon as I put this on here, no approval process. You will see it as a transaction under all transactions. Hopefully you have one that says that. And I should be able to see Getty's images tracked here. It will then be tracked for the budget. So you know that $10 was in the budget. If it's time and materials, it'll be on the billing for you to go to and see Getty's images. Where's my $10? There it is. I was like, where is it? Here's my $10. So again, different ways that we can add it to the invoice. You wouldn't put the miscellaneous cost into an estimate. It wouldn't be shown like the same way, otherwise you double count it. So I wouldn't want to put Getty's images in my estimate and also put it down in miscellaneous cost. Otherwise you might be double doing it unless you are doing a fixed fee and you didn't include it, and then you would want to put it down here to well, then you wouldn't be able to bill it. Hold on, let me rephrase that. If you put it down here and it was fixed fee, you're not going to see it on a fixed fee. You only put it down here as a miscellaneous cost if it was time and materials, if that makes sense. All right, so several different things you've learned today: transactions, the purchase orders, looking at the budget through here, the estimates, how to add those, get those orders in, going through purchasing today. You can do it manually. The people can go ahead and do a vendor invoice through here and match it up to the purchase order, close it out. You can make manual credit card charges, or you can have credit card charges from here, and the expense reports. And if you are a person that has a little bit higher rights, you may also be able to go to your admin managers, today's managers, and you will see expense reports over here. And you will see them if you need to see, what's been open and not paid. There'll be several different reports that you can get to through here that will allow you to see the expense reports and when if they've been paid or not. Question? Any questions? Because that, I think, oh, I have a couple other things. For markup and expense, Mitch Beard, is there a way to set up the system so that markup only applies to the net value and not the tax shipping cost? Marking up the expense. No, I do not believe that you can do that. I will check on it. And Mitch, if you could just type in there so I can get back in touch with you what company you're with, so I can write that down and find out for sure. NP&F. Thank you. I got that. I will find out as soon as this call is over. I'm not positive on that. A couple of new things before we close today. If you didn't see that already, the credit card charge now allows you to add attachments on the ad screen. That's just a new feature. There is now a payment created date column for purchasing views. So what does that mean? The purchasing views, and I just want you to see these things. And then I'll get your questions in a second. Purchasing, save purchasing. The views are down here. I have to go back and read the purchasing view. You should have a new column. So when you're looking at these, you're just going to have a new column that you can add in if you need to. Oh, this call will be, it's not really sent out. It'll be on, I didn't even mention that. And thank you for saying that. The support page, I'm sorry to jump back over. I'm reading questions at the same time I'm trying to do this, where we have our webinars. It usually is released 5 to 7 days usually after we do it. They have to like make sure that it's, we didn't say anything weird before they send it out. So you'll be able to find it under like 20, I think we'll hit 2021. Oh no, it's 2022 webinars. And then you'll see like a list of them and it will be in this area. So probably 5 to 7 days, you'll be able to go to our support.workamajig.com and find that. There's also other webinars you may be interested in from this page. Let's see, live answer. Okay, I think that ended that one. All right, let me go back to this. So it's just adding another column on here. I don't know, some of you guys have a vendor invoice short form. So sometimes some of our clients have asked to have less information for their vendor invoices on them. That was a new option in the back end to use. So you may see it. What I'm talking about is Workamajig Labs. So in your back end under system setup, sometimes you'll see something called Workamajig Labs. And if you see this and you enable it, the form is a shortened form of a vendor invoice. And it only has 4 or 5 spots in it versus a full page. So this is something can be enabled. Why? I guess it added, a lot of people say when I say the vendor invoice, it's this form is going to be shorter if you want it to be. So this form that has all this information it just closes it up. So it's only like this much information on here instead. So that's in your back end. If you guys are interested in making them shorter, you'll go admin manager, system setup, and then look at your Workamajig Labs if you have access and enable this. And you can turn it on and off. I mean, you could turn it on, look at it. If it doesn't make you happy, unenable it or whatever you want to on there. And then the last thing, there was another bigger one. You can now designate clients and vendors as inactive on client and vendor details. Okay, I don't know if this is a huge deal, but I just want to also mention that global options show inactive items search criteria. Okay, so this is just saying we can now do searches on inactive clients if you wanted to, or vendor details. So all it's letting you know, these things can all be found, just so you note, in your clicking under your name, under more, and looking at release notes. They're just some of the things that you'll see in the purchasing section. So all this is saying is I have vendors, and any vendor you have, sometimes people say they have, need to get rid of some of their vendors or something like that. Why is this? And I want to say no longer use it. So if you click on any vendor and you go to the company details, you can come down to the company information, which is here. And then there's this active button. So now you can make a company inactive, but then still search for it as an inactive vendor. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but that's what that new thing is that I was trying to show you on the back end here. Is I can then go and actually look at inactive items in the search criteria on reports for vendor details after I have made that vendor inactive. All right, I know that sounds crazy, but it's a new option, and actually it might work for some of you guys on here. So thank you very much. If there's any more questions, again, you can go to support@workamajig.com. Mitch, I will get back to you shortly through the email system. And hopefully this was helpful today, and in about a week from now, you should be able to get a copy of it for anyone else who needs it. So thank you guys very much for your time. Have a good day.